Well, good afternoon, everyone. I have the privilege and the honor, I would say, to try to keep you awake after the lunch, and it will be, I hope, achieved soon. And for the shiny presentation, I want to mention something. You have to wait for the next one on innovation, new technology, and so forth. So I try to keep the two as entertaining as possible. And also for this one on the standard industry, how do we, as I involve ourselves into this? It is interesting to see that as this morning we spoke about competence, we spoke about knowledge, we spoke about SICOM, a common point to all of that is most of the time we do not know what partners, stakeholders are doing. And here, what I would like to do today on behalf of my colleagues is to introduce to you what do we in EASA do to better support standards development in general, and of course, industry standard in the design world specifically. You will see that we have an interesting organization. Some of you may be familiar with it, some may not be familiar. I would like also to invite to join me Chris Misiak, who is one of the key players into this group. He is the one who designed the tool I will present to you very soon on how to manage our priorities into this management body. So, in a nutshell, what I will introduce to you is this international standard committee within EASA. Well, the title is a bit strange, international. You will understand why in a few minutes. It's because we are tackling both aspects, internal coordination and international participation. So we go forward. So this presentation very quickly. What are the objectives and the scope of this committee? How do we organize ourselves? That's why you will see that we have put in place a quite solid organization. It can always be improved, of course, and streamlined. But given the constraints, given the environment, I think we've achieved today a certain level of maturity, which, of course, based on your feedback, can always be improved. What were, very quickly, the outcome in 2018 and 2019. And then, of course, the most interesting part of the presentation, we have some issues, we have some topics on which we could work better jointly. Again, this presentation is not EASA, how do we work internally, is EASA, how do we organize ourselves in order to better work with you. And in order to better work with you, we need to make sure that you also on your side, industry side, if I may say, you organize yourselves as well as you can. And you will see the last slide, a couple of recommendations. Nothing, no rocket science, common sense, but sometimes you will know very well common sense is the most difficult aspect to implement. So, the scope of this committee. Basically, we have four parts, starting with the one we are not tackling into this committee, JARUS. It's quite simple to explain why aren't we tackling JARUS into this committee, dealing with standards and international cooperation. It is because we work mainly with EuroCAE and other European committees and organizations, and therefore, for this specific committee, it has been a wise decision not to include it in here, because in terms of management, it would be a bit complicated. Then we are coming to the real living parts, ICAO groups and panels, standardization body, and that's what I would like to focus on today, and cooperation with the US, ARAC, AIRC, very familiar to you, how to make sure that we remain harmonized. Alors, it is very important to have this kind of structured approach into our system, because we have some specific agency vision and strategic objectives, which you may be familiar with. They are published. And of course, we have finite resources as much as you have. And we have to make sure that what we decide to work on will be really something we have to work on based on our strategic objectives. In particular, the various recurrent topics today are, of course, we spoke about them already yesterday and this morning, CS23, ASTM 44F committee and so forth, VTOL. We cannot speak about standards without talking about VTOL, of course, eVTOL. A lot of work is coming to us and we have to organize ourselves. On the harmonization with the US side, it's also an important aspect, this ARAC-ARC. I will mention a group very close to my heart. Sorry, I'm still a pilot, so I try to favor a bit the flying aspects. The Flight Test Harmonization Working Group. This was created years ago into this harmonization forum and has led to significant ARC and ARAC work on really topics which are of prime importance to you, industry, and to us, safety regulator. Typical examples: toll prevention, upset recovery, flight control, flight load, fly-by-wire, and so forth. We cannot afford not being present in this kind of business. So that's why, from a management perspective, we have to make sure that we have somewhere in the agency a group managing and streamlining and pushing for those various tasks. Whoops, I was too fast, sorry. Well, nothing new here, so that's basically what I explained. An important point: we are mainly here design, manufacturing industry. Standards are heavily, really heavily used into the ATM world, and we learned a lot from them. When this committee was created, that's now about 5-6 years ago, the real initiation of this business was into those standards, into this way of standardizing activity with industry and stakeholders. So nothing really new here. We try to have key topics, so international cooperation, ICAO, FAA, and other really key partners, standardization bodies. And when we are doing this, normally we are able to support you as best as we can. Very quickly, into this IASC, so you see how it is organized. From day one until last month, Pascal Medal was the chair of this group, the chief engineer, so in charge of all aspects cross-directorate into the agency. Pascal has got some more tasks, and he has handed over the chairmanship of the group to Massimo, who unfortunately has got the flu, as we said earlier on. I'm here on his behalf. So Massimo is the new chair of this group, and he's taking care of safety strategic objectives, so it makes sense. And below you have a number of staff, of directorates participants. All agency directorates are participating at management level into this decision body. So this IISC, this standardization committee, is really the key group in the agency, cross-directorate, no silo effect, nothing. It is really cross-directorate, having the privilege to work on all standardization, international and ICAO tasks to be performed for our common benefit. Now, moving on to the specific standardization body activities, which are what we are interested in today. So the right-hand side of the table here. You see that we cannot be everywhere first. The list here is not exhaustive. As we said, there are many more bodies, but we had to focus our involvement into those bodies where we have, or we anticipate, major benefit and major efficiency gain for our common activities. So EuroCare, RTCA, SAE, ASD-STAN, a number of representatives are in the room so that they can complement as necessary, ETSI, IATA, and ASTM 44, of course. Chris, if you have comments, and do not hesitate to interfere, you are welcome. Yep. I knew you would have a suggestion on the next one. Good. So how do we work in the agency, and how do we set priorities? I will start first with a recurrent comment I hear from some of you in the room, that why aren't you present here? Why shouldn't you do this? Why don't you go there, and so forth? Because we have to abide by some objectives, some priorities, and we have to establish in the most neutral and objective manner possible those priorities. So any proposal, any working group activity is coming to the IISC, and the IISC, according to a number of criteria, will assess the priorities. And the way to assess priorities is now following a quite structured process. It's quite stable and strong in terms of prioritization tool establishment, and Chris was the one who initially developed this tool. We have found 7 criteria. They are listed here. Is it strategic, sensitive? Does it relate to a safety issue? Do we have an harmonization issue? I spoke about my flight test harmonization working group, for instance. It is a typical high-level harmonization issue. New and novel technologies, work at EASA request, because we have some specific direct needs from the agency, and so forth. Chris, maybe a few words on the priorities. How does it work?
So first, I just want to thank Alain for the opportunity to speak to you today, and he was very kind in his introduction. It's not just me. Behind this is a group of people who are working to make sure that the agency's objectives are being fulfilled through our activities on the standards bodies and in the ICAO activities. And what we are trying to do is make sure that the agency's resources are being targeted and funneled to the most important standards where we have interest according to these criteria. So we have, in the previous slide, you saw the organization, and I'll speak towards standards. It's what I know best. We have a similar structure on ICAO. On the standard side, we have the involvement of our chief experts who are responsible for specific domains, and they are making sure that the strategic criteria are being fulfilled for our involvement on different activities. So it's not just an individual from EASA participating here. What we want to make sure it's the agency's objectives being representative in the standards and the development of the technical standards that all of you are familiar with. And I just want to point out again that we've got a team of people working on this, and we are coordinating our efforts so that at the agency level, we're not working at cross purposes.
Many thanks, Chris. So this we can scroll up. Oh, that's interesting. Whoops. What do we do in practice? We are on the executive council or technical committee of the 7 key standardization body. What is in red here on those on this slide are the groups, the standardization body in which we are at council level. So we are the highest possible level. That means in the EuroCare, SAE, ASD STAN, we really have common strategic decisions in between the standardization body and the agency. And in terms of common prioritization of activities, this is essential. There are so many things going on around us. There are so many initiatives that we need together, you, industry, and us. We need really to challenge first what's coming to us and to set common priorities. And when you are at this council level, since we have a voting right, you can heavily influence the way to go one direction or the other. At the end of the day, it is to favor the consensus. The key word here is to achieve consensus in order to be more efficient in the real world when we will make use of those standards for certification purpose. So you see here, Pascal is at the EuroCare Council. In the EuroCare TAC, you have Friedhelm and Mr. Brian Joly and a few others, chief expert colleagues in the SAE and the ASD STAN. So voting rights are really important to us. If we have no voting right, well, we are observers, and then if I use the word from your side, the return on investment may be limited. Because as observer, if it's something we are not happy with, we can comment, we can say, be careful, we can mention some reservations. At the end of the day, we have no say. Well, so that's not the most efficient way to work. When we are officially in an activity, when we are really contributing, that's a different story. And I see some colleagues here from ASD STAN. You may agree or disagree. I would say partly agree, probably. But when we have real empowered agency contribution to a working group, this is beneficial to you and to us, because in the end we can take over your standard when they are found acceptable to us. Sometimes we may agree to disagree, and we have recent cases where, sorry, what you developed was not good enough to us in terms of safety regulator constraints. So no, this we cannot take full credit. But there are many cases where we can take full credit. So this is work under construction. And of course, there are many other working groups here. What you see, sorry for the acronyms, these are EU coordination group for ATM, for unmanned aircraft, for cybersecurity. A lot of groups are developing around us. I would not say proliferation because it has a negative connotation, but in a way, there are a lot of groups generated and sometimes competing. You will see later. And we have to make sure that jointly we can work on it. Now, a specific word on the last bullet, the FAS. What is this FAS UAS? It is the Forum for Aeronautical Software. And in this forum, they met last week in the agency, so I'm quite familiar with what they've done. They're working on critical software development for the future, talking about COTS, talking about DO178C, ED892, and so forth, and how to pave the way for new technology implementation. So the fast UAS was generated for UAS because UAS world, they are permanently challenging our well-established historical structure. They need to have more agile models. So the FAS was really developed into this mindset. And believe it or not, what we saw is that now, after the first brainstorming, sometimes lively brainstorming into this forum, new ideas are developing. And talking, for instance, about COTS, they are working not only for UAS benefit, in fact, but they are working for the whole aviation industry benefit. So that's why I wanted to mention this one in particular. There is a real common interest here to invest time and effort into this kind of group, as long as we know that they are meeting our strategic visions and objectives. Well, a few, I will not go through them all one by one. We are just the last afternoon, right after lunch, so I don't want to bother you with this. You will see when you will get the hands out, quite impressive list of achievements or key contributions here. Again, what is important, you will find all over the presentations, all over the discussions, UAS, general aviation, Part 21 light, and so forth. It is coming back regularly. So this is tackled under all possibilities, under all entry points, be it at Part 21, Michael yesterday talked a lot about it, or standardization bodies contribution. And we are quite happy with what you saw, with what we saw here, in particular, how to coordinate with ASTM. CS23, you saw yesterday, Amendment 5, is basically implementing this ASTM standard for GA. So we have to make sure that in terms of advisory material, we are still able to manage commonly the development within ASTM. So under the IISC, we also manage, monitor, I will not say control because it's a bit another say, but we are monitoring what is going on to make sure that our safety regulatory objectives and constraints are still met. It is nice to declare, I implement a standard. Now, on the long term, it is like initial certification on quantity worthiness, coming back to this morning. We have to make sure that the initial assumptions are still met afterwards. So we agree with the standard at a given time. How does the standard develop? We have to make sure that it develops according to our common safety objectives. As a safety regulator, it is still our prime objective. Alors, no surprise, that was before the achievement or the key contributions. Now the priorities we had for this year, exactly what I said, and it will still be for 2020 with a few adds-on, but clearly within EuroCAE, a main effort is going on into the GA domain, into the VTOL. We are also experimenting a pilot case for the lean processes with EuroCAE, how to streamline development of standards, how to be a bit faster in terms of time to delivery. And the VTOL AMC is used as the pilot case to test this lean standardization development. So that's work under construction. It is clearly a priority for the agency. EuroCAE, the light aspect is becoming more and more important. We spoke about Part 21 light, but more globally, we have to talk about proportionality. You will see in my next presentation on innovation, new technology, there are clearly newcomers. They have to have something different from what we are used to do. If not, and that would be a pity, we will kill them. The business model, the business case would not survive. So proportionality becomes really one of the drivers for all of our tasks. The main criticism we heard before, EASA, you have been working for Airbus or Boeing, and you had a kind of top-down, and the SMEs were really under heavy load. I hope, feedback will tell us, of course, but I hope we are improving dramatically this. We had various initiatives, the GA task force and so forth, this proportionality, this 21 light, M light and so. So we really tried to develop new approaches to our work, still with the safety regulatory objective in mind, therefore with the safety objectives, but with different processes. in order to be more streamlined, not to say efficient, but to be lighter. That means commensurate to the industry needs. So that's the first one. ATM, well, we are here mostly, I would say, manufacturing. I do not think there are many ATM or ANSP participants into the room here, but be aware, be informed, we are heavily involved into the ATM discussion for all kinds of good reasons. We are having also, as you know very well, a lot of discussions, a lot of activities on new space, on how to create a new environment. So ATM is also, in terms of interoperability and future development, data link, ED92C, and so forth, is really a top priority for the agency in order to better support not really your segment of industry, but the one allowing you to operate into a safer space. Alors, that's what is, I have to do a bit of advertisement for my colleagues. As Chris mentioned, there is what we call the IIAC. It is the management body, management group into the agency with a number of participants. But in terms of practical involvement, in terms of expert involvement into activities, in 2018, we were directly contributing to 150 working groups in standardization body. I'm not sure everyone in the room is aware of this effort. This means that we are trying to monitor, to handle, and to manage, thanks to our prioritization tool and so forth, a lot of activities. And this means that with our finite resources and budget, we were able to allocate last year for those working groups about 7,770, so almost 8,000 working hours, only for standardization bodies. Well, it may not look very much for you, but for us, in terms of direct involvement into this long-term investment, it's not negligible, to say the least. And this year, 2019, we are about 15,000 working hours, which means close to being between 9 and 3 full-time equivalent. So you could say that on a daily basis in the agency, we have close to 10 staff members permanently working on standardization bodies activities. It's for the management, for ourselves in the agency. When we ran the analysis, we knew it was quite a lot, but when we got the 2017, 18, 19 result, we really saw a growing tendency, and we are quite pleased by the developments. And as you know very well, we are moving into a performance-based environment, risk-based, performance-based. We want to make more use of standardization of standards. So clearly, if we want to make more use of standards, we have to be more present. And that's what you see here. In terms of direct contribution, we have 15,000 working hours, and in the agency, we have 165 focal points for a given standardization activity task. So it's quite a lot, and this needs to be properly managed, because at the end of the day, what we want to make sure is that when we send someone for an activity, we, that means you and us, get something out of it. You expect that we will accept your standards. Normally, that's the expected deliverable, and we expect that this standard will meet our objectives and will be useful to the two stakeholders. So we have a common interest here to make sure that those 15,000 hours, those 165 focal points, are properly managed into the positive way in order to ensure that we're efficient together. And now comes the interesting part. To achieve, coming back to what I said before here, to make sure we can make good use of those 15,000 hours, we need a bit of your help. You will understand why. What we see today, and you can feel it already from what I said before, we see a really fragmented European standardization body landscape. There are a lot of overlaps, and sometimes, I would say I'm diplomatically correct here, it results in some loss of efficiency. And that's a finding. It is not negative, it's normal life. There are so many things going on, so many activities to be managed. There is this kind of proliferation, as we said before, of activities. And this fragmented landscape, if we, and again, we together, industry and us, do not manage it properly, and at the end of the day, you and us won't be happy with the result. So, since it is fragmented, it is becoming for us more and more difficult to involve ourselves into the right activities. It is quite a challenge. We start to work on the 2020 program for next year. I have to be honest, I have still not fully understood the complete picture. I'm part of the IAC as well. It is not because we don't have any time, it is because we have a lot of redundancies, a lot of overlap sometimes, and that's what is really dangerous for you and for us. For us, because we run the risk to agree on something which we disagree next door. We may again place it there and disagree there, so it's not efficient. And for you, because you will be, at the end of the day, heavily frustrated if we're not able to take credit of a given standard at a given time when we were heavily involved into its development. So, in a nutshell, the last bullet is unfortunately very relevant to nowadays. It may prevent recognition and visibility at international level. Our European landscape is probably not the most or the strongest one we could dream about. We could jointly probably do a bit better. So that's the conclusion that Pascal Medal, as the last 6 years IAC chairman, raised and insists upon, and that I fully make mine as well. You have, European industry all together, because standards are your ownership, not ours, and we are supporting you. You have to check the system, because we speak at the end of the day about industry standards. So, and even better, European industry standards. So my main recommendation to you on behalf of all my colleagues is, you saw what we have today. In the agency, we have a lot of willing people, good experts, ready to work with you. But we will work efficiently with you only if we manage the vision, the objectives, and the deliverables jointly. That's the main recommendation, the main dream from us in the agency. If we want to use more industry standard in the future, and we want, and it is Patrick's key vision, and we have started to implement it in many domains, if we want to make more use of industry standards, we have to make sure that we foster common effort and common directions without having too many alternative ways. So, in a nutshell, that's what I had to introduce to you on behalf of my IAC colleagues. Chris, any additional comments you would like to make? Are you fully happy with the start of the prioritization exercise for next year? We are not obliged to answer the question. But I stop joking here. Really, those last couple of slides are for us the main points on which we have to work together. And we are prepared to support industry to be a bit less fragmented, but it is not our decision. Industry standards are industry standards. And that's why you first have to check the system as industry key stakeholders to make sure that, as we said here with Pascal and Massimo, help yourself to help us. And in fact, we are missing half of the sentence. It's not only help yourself to help us, but then it will be for us to help you even better. And with this, I would like to say thank you all. And if you have any questions, let's try to address them. Thank you.
Well, we got a few questions, Alain. I don't know whether you can answer to them directly, or maybe Chris can support, I don't know.
Oh, well, there are quite a few here. The first one would be for you, Marcus, in fact. You were expecting the reply, I'm pretty sure. Alors, in the meantime, I'll read the other one. So, is our EASA roadmap for recognition of AMC good practices of ASD DOA think tank released pre-end series? I think Chiro may help here as well. If we are not, we'll take note and we'll come back to you. This is work under construction. I know that there are a lot of discussions. Maybe Patrick, you can help us to answer this one, because I'm sure it's coming from your neighbor here. So,
well, we have a system in place where we comment and support on these documents. I'm not quite sure what you mean with a roadmap for recognition. You mean a formal process that these things are automatically, or not automatically, but acknowledged by EASA for certain things? Okay, that's something to be discussed, how we could set that up.
There is another one below. Why create EuroKA versions of RTCA document? Well, in fact, I would revert the question to you because EuroKA is the European standardization body. So indeed, sometimes we have to maybe rely on others. But as European standardization body, I would say I am the least best person to answer the question. It should come from the one having decided to do so. That means the European standardization body. Alors, how do we call
Alain, maybe one comment on that. If you look at DO 160 versus ED 14, they are very old documents. And at that time, a lot of these documents, whether it was this one or others, they were not working together like we used to do now. And I think that explains why some of these documents exist, even though they are identical.
Now, in the same spirit, what we see today, we want to make more and more use of EuroKA to support us or to support you in developing new standards. We spoke about VTOL before, advisory material to our special conditions and so forth. We are tasking, if I may say, nowadays, not back to the future in the past, as Marcus mentioned for the others. We are really trying to task more and more those standardization bodies. But the issue is that we are only one player among many. So we have to make sure that within the council, this reaches a majority and is agreed to be a priority. Alors, which? Oui, go ahead.
Just one more comment on the RTCA and EuroKA connection. You're probably aware that to the extent possible, when a new standard is going to be developed, they try to have them done in parallel paths. So the documents, the standard will finally be released by both organizations at the same time, and the committees doing the work are coordinating the development of that performance standard. That's the objective, the goal. So there's no cross-purpose, there's concurrent development, and the standards should be equivalent. In the past, maybe it didn't happen, but that's really the goal that we're trying to enforce. As Alain said, when we are having one of our EASA staff sitting on the EuroKA Council, that's one of our goals, and we also try to enforce that through our participation on the Technical Advisory Committee at EuroKA as well.
Thanks, and that's a very good point because the FAS, so the Forum for Aeronautical Software I mentioned before, is a common EuroKA, RTCA working group. So that's typically what Chris was describing, even more, because it is this time integrated. And they will work not only on codes and other issues, but they will work on the DO 178C and so forth. So really on topic of common interest. So today, since few years, really this is an important remark. Thanks a lot, Chris. We try to foster common effort, and it has worked pretty well. Now we need to do the same within Europe, among the various bodies. These two historical, let's say, big players, RTCA, EuroKA, SAE also, we have very well, I would say, established connections. So it is relatively easy to anticipate and to know what's going on. So now within our internal landscape, I will not start with all of the bodies which are in place, but then we have to make sure that we can do the same in terms of channeling common efforts. That's our most challenging task for the next years, let's say. And new business model anyway will fix it because you will have to take actions.
Okay, maybe one of the two questions, I don't know whether you can answer on the AS 9116, whether you know that detail. I guess we have to come back offline. Okay.
We take note and we'll come back on it, yeah.
Okay. Good. Thanks, Alain. Thanks, Chris.